Sheriff Scott Israel was grilled by Jake Tapper on Sunday, where the official did everything possible to avoid blame for the blunders leading to the Parkland shooting. At times, he seemed like he was reading from a fortune cookie.
Do you think that if the Broward Sheriff's Office had done things differently, this shooting might not have happened?
Yeah, listen, if ifs and buts were candy and nuts, O.J. Simpson would still be in the record books.
I don't know what that means. There's 17 dead people, and there's a whole long list of things your department could have done differently.
Oh, man. I don't know. If ifs and buts were candy and nuts, this jackass would be out on his butt. At least I made it rhyme. It was the same word. But he also said this with a straight face.
Are you really not taking any responsibility for the multiple red flags that were brought to the attention of the Broward Sheriff's Office about this shooter before the incident?
Jake, I could only take responsibility for what I knew about. I exercised my due diligence. I've given amazing leadership to this agency.
Amazing leadership?
Amazing. See, he's less a sheriff and more a politician. And like a politician, he's just trying to cover his butt, hoping the media focuses on other things like ending evil NRA discounts, which does nothing to stop what happened in Parkland. And so we keep hearing more about the mistakes, that authorities received many tips warning them that Cruz was going to do something bad, including potentially a mass shooting. And then there are the deputies failing to confront the shooter. The sheriff denied these facts before and now does all he can to save his job, including throwing one deputy under the bus.
I gave him a gun, I gave him a badge, I gave him the training. If he didn't have the heart to go in, that's not my responsibility.
That's some leader. But should you be surprised? Remember the CNN town hall? Knowing the lapses in his leadership, he diverted the audience away from his own incompetence toward Dana Lash, who probably would have done a better job than him.
I understand you're standing up for the NRA, and I understand that's what you're supposed to do. But you just told this group of people that you are standing up for them. You're not standing up for them until you say, I want less weapons.
That's the real disgrace, knowing what he knew then and playing that card for applause. So maybe you should be mad, but not at the NRA, at this dope. Kimberly, when he was talking about that deputy, and he says, he's only responsible up to a point. Is he right that, he wasn't there, so it wasn't his problem?
I mean, just the language, his rhetoric really just shows his lack of integrity, his lack of leadership skills and qualities. He is the head boss. He should be the one taking ownership of this situation and really making it a teachable moment and saying that this was, in fact, something that they could have done better, that the deputy should have gone in, that they've had the training, that they should, re-examine situations like this. Maybe they're not making it real enough so that people aren't confronted enough with situations like this to be able to make those snap decision, judgments. And this guy seems like he's just playing to the theater, that he thinks he's some character, flawed, for sure, in a Shakespearean play, and he wants to just play to the crowd, and the more adulation that they give him, the better he feels. And you just see it by those moments, especially because when you know what he knew at the time, how he behaved in the town hall. I mean, that's why some people are calling for him to resign.
Yeah, or at least be suspended, Jesse. I don't know. When he said he mentioned his amazing leadership. He's trying to steal from Donald Trump's vernacular. But it didn't work.
It's like if Hillary, after Benghazi, had prayed her amazing leadership. It doesn't make sense to me. He's a political animal, and he acts like a politician because he doesn't accept responsibility. This guy switched parties to run for office. He was accused of running a patronage mill. And at this point, he has now compared himself to MLK, Gandhi, and Abraham Lincoln.
That's it?
Yeah. So he sounds like your typical politician. So the one deputy didn't go into the building, and then when more deputies showed up, they didn't go into the building. So they were either cowards, they broke protocol, or had the wrong protocol. We're going to find out which one that is. We also know that they were called 23 times about this guy. 2 of those times they were warned that he was going to be a possible school shooter. And now he's running a PR campaign. He's going on CNN and blaming the NRA and not accepting accepting responsibility, and he's taking credit away from the other department that showed up ahead of his own deputies. It almost seems like he's more concerned with bashing the NRA than solving the school safety issue. And Democrats, who for the last several years have said that police departments need to be held to a higher standard, need more supervision, need more scrutiny, now they really have no appetite to look into the sheriff. Republicans usually give police the benefit of the doubt. But at this point, looks like there's a lot of mistakes that were made. The facts fall where they may. I just don't want to see a cover-up, because it sounds like there may be a cover-up going on.
Dana, when you watched the Jake Tapper interview, I guess it was on Sunday, do you think he realized that the sheriff had fleeced him at the town hall? And this was like payback? He's like going, all right, you knew all this stuff.
But he does it in a way that's classy, right? He doesn't drag him through the mud, gave him a chance to answer. And the answers, as you pointed out and you showed, were horrible. There was no sympathy for victims or the families. No. There was no defense. It was just all defensiveness. And quite honestly, I thought it was delusion. And I do wonder if he actually thinks that he did nothing wrong. But I believe that in the military, right, if your soldiers don't follow through, like, you're responsible, like, or else it doesn't work.
It doesn't, chain of command.
Or if you don't have a chain of command that is followed, then the chain will break.
What do you, Juan, do you think he deserves some kind of discipline? I mean, there is talk of suspension, or should he resign? The governor can fire him, even though he's an elected official, I believe.
This whole conversation is just, to me, like way off in the weeds somewhere. I mean, to me, what we need to be talking about is what happened with those young people who are dead. And
that's what we're doing, actually.
Well, I don't think so. I think
if somebody had reacted to the shooter,
they would be alive.
He would be alive. But go ahead.
Well, no. I mean, President Trump today said that even without a weapon, he would have run in, right?
But that's not the point.
I mean, the point is the dead young people,
right?
And so, to me, you see now this rush of Republicans to blame the FBI, to blame the sheriff of the county. Never, ever to talk about the NRA, the proliferations of guns in this society, that a wacko young man who's underage, under 21, is able to get an assault rifle. To me, this is where the conversation should be. So we can go back and forth about whether or not you should fire Sheriff Israel. Fine, I don't know.
That was the topic today, Juan.
Well,
we often talked about practical solutions for the last 2 weeks.
That's not a practical solution.
I think it is if you're responsible for what happened.
Right. That's going to bring these young people back. That's going to stop more shootings in the future.
Oh, then you know what? We shouldn't imprison anybody, because that doesn't bring back the dead. Somebody murders somebody, don't put them in jail, because that's not going to bring back the dead.
No,
that's insane.
Exactly opposite of what you would normally argue, where you say things like the death penalty and strong punishment will in fact discourage repeat crimes. In this case, I don't see the going after this sheriff or even the deputy. And by the way, Dana, he thinks that he did a good job. His lawyer put out a statement saying he was the first to call in.
I wasn't talking about Peterson, but of Israel.
But I'm saying, in terms of this conversation about the sheriff, it seems to me it's almost like a political ploy by Republicans to get attention away from the failings of the
politics
NRA.
started in the town hall when he tried to divert the responsibility for his actions onto Dana Loesch.
Correct.
That was the political move. Now, you want to talk about the NRA, and you want to talk about solutions to prevent future gun violence. Let's roll this tape of Donald Trump actually mentioning the NRA in an interesting way today.
Don't worry about the NRA. They're on our side. You guys, half of you are so afraid of the NRA. There's nothing to be afraid of. And you know what? If they're not with you, we have to fight them every once in a while. That's okay. They're doing what they think is right. I will tell you, they are doing what they think is right. But sometimes we're going to have to be very tough, and we're going to have to fight them. But we need strong background checks. For a long period of time, people resisted that. But now people, I think, are really into it.
So, Jesse, how political is that? That seems like the most middle of the road. He goes to one hand and the other on in the NRA. I mean,
it's pretty honest, and it's for a politician that takes a lot of courage to take on someone that's been backing your party for decades. Juan makes this point like you can't chew gum and walk at the same time. Republicans have criticized the FBI, the sheriff, and Republicans have also put forth solutions to school safety by taking on the NRA and saying raise the limit for purchasing an AR-15, by banning bump stocks, expanding background checks. All we've heard from the left is let's just crucify the NRA. I'm glad that all of a sudden you think police just need to be trusted willy-nilly and everything they do is perfect. Because now when they do make mistakes, you should be able to hold police accountable.
Yes, but I didn't say
So
that.
you don't
I didn't
think they
say
should be held accountable
Well,
for blowing this one?
No, but let me
you
just
don't.
say.
See,
of
I
course
do.
they-
I believe these people are paid for by taxpayer money, and if they make a mistake, they should be held accountable.
Of course,
just like any politician or anybody that works for the federal government. But you want to give them a pass, and we don't know why.
Why do you say such a thing?
You just said it.
Let me just
You said you don't care. It doesn't matter. It's a diversion.
I do care. This is a diversion. But let me just come to your point.
It's not.
The bump stocks, right?
Sure.
How long has Congress had since Vegas to act? How long has President Trump had since
everybody
Vegas
wants
to act?
bump stocks, ban one. That's a diversion. That's a diversion because the bump stock wasn't even used here.
It would be a diversion if something had been done.
Kimberly is raising her hand.
Yes, but not raising an arm, just the hand. So here's the problem here. I think that, if we really just want to be honest about it, all of these things should be examined and looked at. And to be fair, to give credit, the president did have a listening session to discuss this. And
exactly.
People did bring up weapons. They did bring up guns. The president was one of the first people to come out and say, look, we have to take an examination of all this and what happened. Maybe we need to raise the age. Maybe we should make it so that, bump stocks aren't, available, et cetera. So all these things are in play. But it doesn't mean that we should be derelict in our duty to do an examination of the Sheriff's Department, just like we've done at the FBI, to make sure that the right protocols are in place, to make sure that this doesn't happen again. That is healthy, it is responsible, and it is competency, and that's what we need to focus on here. So all of this is appropriate discussion, just like we should discuss the sheriff here, Israel, and whether or not he is the right person to be doing that job. I think the answer is clear.
Yeah, Dana, when we talk about diversions and political agendas, it's like the NRA discount story is kind of like a diversion away. Like everybody here at this table and Donald Trump and his listening event. There's everything from civil tags to hardening soft targets. How does killing, banning NRA discounts or getting rid of that? How does that help?
So there was a rash of it, right? So United Airlines, Enterprise Rent-A-Car, I think Hertz joined in, and now Delta. And so in this scenario, I understand that there is going to be opposition to the NRA. It's like there is opposition to Planned Parenthood, right? Like the mirror organizations for ideology. But in this situation, when we've talked about see something, say something should lead to do something. Yeah. And we know that the do something did not happen in this case. Yeah. So why would you take that out on dues-paying members of the NRA who want to rent a car from you? Why are you punishing them? It doesn't make sense. And then it gets even worse, I think, because now an elected official in Georgia is saying, oh, yeah, Delta, well, we're going to come back at you and take away your tax break. Like, this is actually going to lead nowhere because a corporation has the right to make a decision. If they want to lose customers, fine.
Yeah.
I mean, if it means that much to them and they want to take the PR hit for it, or if maybe they think that they get good PR out of this, they've made that calculation as a business. I don't think the government should come in then and try to punish them.
And lastly, this sheriff is the reason why people want to arm themselves, because they don't believe the sheriff can protect their safety as they didn't this time, and they want to be able to protect themselves.
How'd it work this time?
Right.
Yeah, and Enterprise should probably focus more on the safety of their cars than this.
You had a bad experience?
Some people have had bad experiences, and you can Google that. All right? The Democratic rebuttal to the Republican memo is out. Does it bolster the GOP case? Next.
Over the weekend, Democrats released a redacted version of their highly hyped memo to counter Republican allegations of surveillance abuses on the Trump campaign. Does it harm their case more than it helps them? The president thinks so.
That was really just a confirmation of, if you call it the Republican memo or the Nunes memo, it's referred to as a lot of things, but that was nothing but a confirmation. And a lot of bad things happened on the other side, not on this side, but on the other side.
And you know what's
somebody
interesting?
should look into it, because what they did is really fraudulent, and somebody should be looking into that. And by somebody, I'm talking about you-know-who.
Adam Schiff spent his Sunday firing back on Twitter and TV.
I'm not surprised the president doesn't like it. I'm not surprised, frankly, that the White House tried to bury this memo response as long as they could. But it's important for the public to see the facts that the FBI acted appropriately in seeking a warrant on Carter Page. They're not part of some deep state, as the president apparently would like the public to believe.
Against my better judgment, I'm going to go to Juan first on this one. And I'm not going to interrupt you. I'm just going to say wrong every time I think you're wrong. Go ahead.
I think that's the president's language.
Wrong.
Wrong. There you go.
It works.
I think the president calls into Judge Janine and says Adam Schiff is, you know, a bad guy and a liar and all the rest. And it just strikes me so funny because if you stop and think about it, his own Justice Department said it's reckless to put the first memo out, the Nunes memo, right? His own FBI said they had grave concerns. Why? Because it was going to undermine the FISA court, and you would have to put out documents. So here comes the Schiff memo, and gosh, it indicates that not only were there 4 judges on the FISA court who looked at this, but it indicates that the FISA court said, you know what, we're not using any dossier as the basis for spying on the campaign or on Trump.
Wrong.
We had, there you go, there's Trump again.
He held back.
And they say instead, here we have legitimate documentation of Carter Page, who had lived in Moscow for 4 years, business dealings with the Russians. There were contacts between Russians, not only Page, but Papadopoulos, all predating it, all justifying that the FISA court would say there's a reason, a legitimate reason, to look at these contacts with Russia.
Wrong. All right. I will later at the end go point by point to counter that. Kimberly, would you like to come in and say that?
That's the cover of like the wrong.
I sense a new segment or show called Wrong with Jesse Waters.
Take it away.
Or Greg in Love with Jake Tapper.
Jake did do a really nice job on that last.
Oh my God.
Greg did.
Greg and
really
Jesse.
did a nice job.
Yeah, Greg.
So what do you think about the Dem memo? Do you think it helps their case, or do you think it just muddies the water?
I think it muddies the water. I don't know necessarily, meaning the Democrats' case?
Yes.
Yeah, I don't know necessarily that it helps their case a lot. I would say in parts it does. Look, the president's very frustrated by it because he feels there's so much partisan politics at play, and he's had everything said about him and his campaign and his family and everyone associated with him in Russian collusion, and they tried to take the election away from him. They're trying to delegitimize the presidency. He's at war with the press. He's frustrated. So this is just another example where he feels that people are trying to obfuscate issues and make it difficult for the American people to even understand, even bright as they are, what's going on here. And this is really just an example of kind of politics not really working at its best in D.C., and that was the whole Drain the Swamp movement, right? Because
That's
this
right.
is what we're seeing here.
One of the things Juan
memo at a
mentioned
time.
was that the dossier really didn't play any role in the FISA application, and that they had verified all this stuff when they made the application. That's directly contradicted by James Comey, who testified in front of the Senate Intelligence Committee, that 3 months after the warrant on Page had been granted, that the dossier was still unverified and salacious when he briefed the president about it in January 2017, Greg.
I just have to admit that our memo is bigger than their memo. In this game of rock, paper, scissors, Nunes was paper and they were rock. This paper goes over rock, in case you remember. They claim that they countered the Republican accusation of abuse, but they used the word speculate, that they speculated that they knew where the dossier. That's not a refutation. The speculation is not a refutation. This is like me trying to return a serve from Venus Williams. It just went nowhere. I think the Democrats need to find an alternative path to work because Russia isn't going to get you to the office.
Dana?
Well, I agree with that, that the Democrats need a message of some sort to go into the midterm, and Russia cannot be it if they expect to win, although they do have a lot of energy on their side. I read 3 articles on each side, and to me, it's a wash. I just look at it, and I think that one thing we don't have here is that there are 4 FISA court judges. We have the application. We don't have the conversation during the appearance in front of the judges.
Right.
What did they ask them? What were the answers? We have no idea, and I don't think necessarily that we need to know. The other thing that this one does is to say that there were several of these people that were on the Trump campaign. And I'm not saying that President Trump knew. How would he have known that they were already under investigation? He wouldn't necessarily have known that Manafort and Gates and Page and these characters had this problem before they even joined the campaign.
Well, one thing the Democrat memo does not do, it clearly says that they told the FISA judge that Hillary and the DNC paid for it. They did not tell the FISA court judge. They buried that information. At no point was the judge made aware that Hillary and the DNC paid for this political dossier.
Wrong.
Right.
Nice.
Chaos deepening for Democrats ahead of the midterms up next.
Learn more at ring.com.
Welcome back. On Friday at CPAC, President Trump warned Republicans not to get complacent about the upcoming midterm elections. Democrats could also heed that advice. In a bid to shake things up, the party in California has declined to endorse their longtime senior senator, Dianne Feinstein, in her bid for another term. Maxine Waters, the Democratic congresswoman from California, took the stage this weekend at the convention to drum up support for building a unified blue wave in November. And she's still not letting up on President Trump.
Democrats, I don't care what the Republicans say. I say impeach 45. Impeach 45. Impeach 45. Impeach 45. My gun is bigger than your gun. My rocket is more powerful than your rocket. And on and on and on. All I see is two heads of state, Donald Trump and Kim Jong-un, both who have questionable agendas and questionable mental health.
Wow, pretty strong. But Dana, let's go to what I think was big news this weekend. You get an 84-year-old Senator, Dianne Feinstein, not endorsed by her party as she seeks a fifth term in the U.S. Senate.
When you think about the Bernie bros during the last election, there's a real pull between the pragmatists of the Democratic Party, of which there's a shrinking number, and the progressives. And in California, progressive is where you really want to be if you want to succeed in Democratic politics right now. You think of Tom Steyer and Nancy Pelosi. Like, she continues to give the Republicans a lot of fodder to run against her. So I think that I wouldn't say that Feinstein's not going to win. I mean, if she wins the primary, she's probably going to win because the Republican Party is so decimated there. But I do think that this loose talk about impeachment absolutely helps President Trump. Maybe not himself and his approval ratings, but it will galvanize Republicans to go out and support other Republicans in order to prevent that. You can't impeach somebody just because you don't like them or that their rhetoric isn't good. And in fact, I would say that there's one Democrat really making this point. Susan Glasser interviewed Congressman Jerry Nadler in the New Yorker, and so he was head of the Judiciary Committee, and it would be up to him. And he says, my view of impeachment is to be very careful that when Tom Steyer is saying, I will only give you money if you pledge that you will vote for impeachment, that Nadler says that is very premature. So I feel like the elders of the Democratic Party are trying to tap the brakes on this because they realize it's not the path to victory, and you cannot impeach someone because you don't like his Twitter account.
Right? All right. Well, but Kimberly, just to quickly finish up on the Dianne Feinstein point, she got 37% of support from the Democrats in California this weekend. 57%, just below the 60% threshold that would have won him the endorsement, went to Kevin DeLong, who's the Senate leader in California. And the key issue that apparently differentiates the two is long support for immigrants.
Well, okay, so, you know, it's pretty appalling that I know Dianne Feinstein very, very well for really just, I guess, the majority of my entire existence on the planet. And I know her well from San Francisco, and she's, you know, been a tireless public advocate. I find her to be one of the more reasonable Democrats, which is probably why they are not supporting her, because she's actually very good about the United States military, national security, foreign policy, has common sense as it relates to the economy, and tax issues, and so they want to go so far left and so liberal that they're going to seek out people like that. They want people who are like bomb throwers, but it's going to really fracture and alienate, I think, a lot of voters that might have gone Democrat, this new kind of like platform the Democratic Party has. And so, you know, I think it's disappointing that they're doing this. Obviously, immigration is something that's like a hot button issue right now, but just goes to show you Democrats don't even know a winner when they see one.
Jesse, you think it's a legitimate argument to say, well, 5 5 terms. She's, 84.
Ageist.
That's fine. I mean, if people don't think she's fit at that age, then they can primary her out of there. It doesn't really bother me that much. I just think the Democrats, the whole platform of I'm going to take your guns, let's impeach Trump, and Russia, Russia, Russia is a garbage platform. It's not going to do anything for the Democrats if they want to take back the House. Trump's at 50% approval. The economy's humming.
Yep.
Russia, Russia, Russia
wait,
does
did
not.
you say 50? I haven't seen that.
Yeah, well, check the internet. It's all over the place.
Okay.
And then the Russia stuff doesn't move the needle. It might motivate a small portion of the people, but that's fine. That wasn't the CPAC poll. That was.
I was thinking of the other ones this morning.
Okay. And listen, they can motivate a certain segment of the Democratic base with that stuff. That's not going to get them over the hump. Democrats have almost ceded the economy to the Republicans because none of them voted for the tax cuts. They have to carve out an actual policy platform besides Trump is mean, racist, and mentally ill. It has to be something maybe on health care or education or college tuition.
Guns.
I don't know, because they lost the House trying to take back guns before. I don't know if they're going to make the same mistake again. They very well might. But the polls right now show an even race in the congressional midterms. So Democrats right now, they're in deep, deep trouble. They know it. And they haven't learned any lessons from the 2016 election.
Sometimes I worry about where you get your information, but I want to go to Greg.
Sometimes
I don't know. So I want to go to Greg because, Greg, I wanted you to comment on Maxine Waters and the Impeach 45. Is that going to be a new slide? Will we get hats?
Yes, we'll get hats.
And T-shirts?
You know, the thing is, I want them to continue down this path because the best way you can elect your adversary is be irrational about how much, like, if you are irrational in your anti-Trumpism, it will only help him. The same way calling Obama a Kenyan-born interloper helps Obama. Like, the more, every party has that extreme. Yes, but I was doing it to mock people who believe that. Unfortunately, they didn't know I was mocking them. But, and here's a serious point about this whole impeachment thing. Remember what happened after the Clinton impeachment? Something called 9/11. It's a correlation, not an observation. I mean, it's barely a correlation. It's an observation. But it's the kind of political distraction we choose that ends up ignoring certain catastrophic threats before us. If we get so bogged down in this stuff, we don't see the other things in front of us. And you could argue, like, Clinton was so, like, he spent all his time trying to cover up the stuff he was doing, and he didn't see what was coming down the pike.
What happened to Clinton's approval ratings when they tried impeachment?
Went up.
All right, a California mayor feels it's her duty to keep ICE from doing their duty. She's tipping off illegals that the feds are coming. Next.
Delightful, fancy feast, creamy delights. Love is in the details.
Not only is California unwilling to help the Trump administration curb illegal immigration, one mayor just took steps to warn illegals the feds were coming. Democratic Oakland Mayor Libby Schaaf put out a press release this weekend to sound the alarm about potential ICE raids in her city before they happened. She says it was her ethical obligation to do so.
My priority is to keep this community safe. It is not my wish to panic people, but to ensure that they're prepared with information. Residents should know that they do not have an obligation to open their doors if an ICE official knocks. While I am very committed to being a law-abiding citizen, I feel confident that my sharing this information, because I did not receive it through official channels, is legal, and frankly, it's my ethical obligation. I felt that it was my duty to share the information.
All right, well, consult with the Lord, clearly. No word about the ethical obligation Schaaf has to protect the legal United States citizens in her city. The move came days after the president warned that he may pull ICE agents from the state, which refuses habitually to cooperate. So let's go California, shall we?
Yes, I have a solution, as always, to the great problems of this world. The Mexican president is angry at Donald Trump about the wall. California wants to do its own thing independently as a sanctuary state. Remember the Louisiana Purchase? I do. Sell California to Mexico.
We'd owe money.
No. I did the math. You sell California to Mexico for $47.5 trillion. They could pay it off over 25 years. Mexico, we take $10 trillion, we throw that into the budget and announce a 3-year tax holiday for the remaining 49 states. You don't pay any taxes because we got it from Mexico. And then the remaining $37.5 trillion goes against solving world major issues like hunger, poverty, air pollution, which costs $2.5 trillion a year. For 15 years, that's $37.5 trillion. The Mexican officials and police can now deal with California gang crime and their bankrupt cities and their economic inequality. We get tax breaks, and the world conquers all of its problems. This is the answer. We'll be right back.
Oh, my goodness. All right. Coming to a briefing room near you soon.
Probably not.
Yeah, probably not. I'm a little bit worried about the massive amount of debt that California has. But, okay, if you did the math, that's enough to pay that off. Okay.
Well, if, let's just say this is another hypothetical situation, that there's going to be a drug bust. And somebody in the Justice Department or the FBI knows about the drug bust that's coming, and they give a heads up to the people so that they scatter. How wrong would that be?
Who goes
and
to jail?
To me, that's the same thing.
I totally
if they're here
agree.
illegally, they should have to suffer the consequences for that. I actually think that the Democrats, if they want to push back on immigration, these stories about parents and children being separated at the border and held miles apart, unable to see each other. There was one story today of an African woman who has not seen her 6-year-old daughter in several weeks, and I think that's a much stronger play for them, not this.
I totally agree. I mean, but sometimes you just wonder where the common sense goes. All right, Jesse.
Common sense goes here. Kimberly, you're going
No, because people will say that I'm his new mother.
Well,
I refuse.
he got a mom text in wrong.
You're a mother from another mother.
Oh, exactly. A brother from another mother.
Yeah.
There you go.
All right. Juan would disown me. There's going to be a lot of these anti-Trump superheroes that are going to pop up, like this person in California, like Rahm Emanuel, who kind of want to earn their street cred by fighting the system and fighting Donald Trump. You get a lot of free publicity, and they can survive it because they're in left-wing precincts, but I don't think it's good for the country. She's breaking the law. U.S. Code 1324, you cannot conceal, harbor, or shield from protection an illegal alien. You can face fines or imprisonment up to 5 years, although she's never going to jail. It's amazing how the Democratic Party has changed their platform over the last couple decades. This party, a couple years ago, voted for the border fence, voted to, not shield illegal aliens from protection, voted for sweeps, voted for raids. Now it's just open season. Let them in, give them free stuff, never prosecute them. It's amazing. They're not the party of law and order anymore. And Trump, when he fights the federal government, when he thinks things are wrong, he's called a traitor. When the Democrats do it, they're heroes.
Okay, Juan.
Well, I think a couple of things. One is big news when you have the Supreme Court of the United States decline to look at the Dreamers situation. It means that the March deadline is not going to be in place. The second thing to say is I think that what the mayor of Oakland is doing is saying, even if you are here illegally, there are certain steps like you don't have to open your door, you don't have to do X, Y, Z. That's information that's given out by everyone. That's not breaking the law. That's not supporting people being here illegally, and I think that's an important distinction to be heard.
All right, thank you so much. Are you feeling super stressed?
Sell California.
Wow. Are you feeling super stressed out like a lot of other Americans? One writer has an interesting take on who's to blame, what's to blame next. Greg.
This program is brought to you by IHOP.
63% cite the future of the nation as a stressor. A USA Today columnist points to a long list of contributing factors like mass shootings, natural disasters, and also, quote, travel bans, minority groups in the crosshairs of the Trump administration, or patients with catastrophic illnesses threatened by the loss of health care. Such fears are real and specific. And, Greg, certainly that is true for some people, but overall, we talked about this last week, how we have a theory.
Yes.
About the worries of why you worry about the future.
Oh, I think it's an evolutionary module in your brain because you want to live longer, so you just naturally worry even when things are good. But the exhaustion that this person's talking about is caused by our own inability to shut off content, right, from our phones. It's not about the story itself, but the quantity of the stories. This guy's blaming his liberal exhaustion on the right, but he's actually just losing, and that's exhausting when you're losing. But you know what it is? You always feel sick and tired after the third trip to the buffet. And it's no different here. Well, you got to put your phone down.
Yeah.
Use your phone. This is the
We'll
buffet.
go 3 times.
This is I do. And it's like, and nobody feels worse when they go for a walk.
That's
unless,
right.
Unless you get run over by a teenager who's texting.
That's true. Well, yeah, you wouldn't want that. But you never regret taking a walk. That's true.
Yes.
Especially if you have a dog. Jesse, taking a social media break, maybe that can help people not be so stressed out.
Well, I'm stressed because I work with Greg every day, and he's just very tiresome. But I've learned how to cope.
Wow, he was nice to you, Ron.
I don't know what happened.
Ron doesn't bother me at all. That's easy. See this guy in the green room over here. So I think
Diva.
It's okay. We can talk about it in the one more thing, or in your case, 2 more things. I think this country's so soft right now. You had the civil rights movement, the Vietnam War in the 60s. You know, we attacked Pearl Harbor, 9/11. Now we have things are so good now. This is buffet season. The travel ban. How many Americans does that affect? I don't think it affects any. I think maybe a handful. The DACA, yeah, people are anxious about that. That's 700,000 people in a country of 350 million. Enough. Go take a walk.
Juan, are you stressed and exhausted?
I feel exhausted. I do feel like, you know, I don't think there's ever been a time.
You're getting over the flu.
That's true. But I think in terms of the politics, people in Washington say to me, hey, you weren't around in the 60s, buddy.
Right.
The cities were burning. They were throwing this president out, doing this president. I mean, you know, you couldn't, the race relations were terrible, everything. And I think, well, that's true. I wasn't around in the 60s like I am now. But I must say, right now, people, it's not just me. The polls say 60+% of Americans think that, you know,
well, they
it's end
also,
of
Kimberly,
days
they worry about the future because, especially if you're worried about the industries of the future, what sort of jobs are going to be available, and AI is coming, and all of this stuff.
Robots.
I don't worry about any of that. Greg is the one that has the nightmares, or maybe you call them dreams, where I come to get you in the future.
GOP FL governor infuriates conservatives with shock position on guns. Student safety versus Second Amendment rights has been at the center of a heated debate in the wake of the Parkland, Florida school shooting, and it seems Governor Rick Scott is fueling the flames with a proposed plan to reduce the frequency of such tragedies. More than a week after the fatal shooting that left 17 people dead, the Republican governor of Florida said at a news conference on Friday that the motivation for his plan was to keep students safe. "We must take care of our kids," Scott said, according to CNN. "Keeping guns away from dangerous people and people with mental issues is what we need to do." Yet, the way Scott intends to go about this, called the Major Action Plan, is bound to spark controversy among many conservatives, as it involves the creation of a violent threat restraining order. The order is similar to the gun violence restraining order in California that is aimed at securing court orders so firearms may be confiscated if a family member complains about the gun owner. Scott's proposed restraining order also aims to prohibit unstable individuals from firearm possession or access when either a family member, community welfare expert or law enforcement officer files a sworn request and presents evidence to the court of a threat of violence involving firearms or other weapons. There would be speedy due process for the accused and any fraudulent or false statements would face criminal penalties, the plan states. However, no matter how well-intentioned, it continues to raise questions as to how it would work in cases similar to Cruz's. The family Cruz had been staying with repeatedly called police on him but refused to file charges after the authorities arrived, according to Breitbart. At the time, one family member chalked up Cruz's erratic behavior to him merely suffering significantly from the loss of his mother. Scott is also pushing to ban bump stocks and implement tougher background checks, especially when it concerns those who either present as, or have a history of being, mentally ill. Under the plan, people who wouldn't be able to get guns include those who are subject to an injunction for protection against stalking, cyberstalking, date and violence, repeat violence, sexual violence, or domestic violence. In line with the pleas of many Democrats and some Republicans, the plan also aims to develop a more advanced mental health initiative and active shooter training. Moreover, it bumps the minimum age to purchase a firearm from 18 to 21, though none of the plan's proposals include banning AR-15s, the same gun used in numerous shootings throughout the years. A member of the National Rifle Association, Scott said he won't be calling for a ban on all firearms, instead explaining he wants to really focus on the problem. I know there are some who are advocating a mass takeaway of Second Amendment rights for all Americans. That is not the answer, Scott said. Banning specific weapons and punishing law-abiding citizens is not going to fix this. What we have to do is we have to really focus on the problem, he added. We've got to take all weapons away from people with mental illness, people who are threatening themselves or threatening others. What do you think? Scroll down to comment below.